I think we also have a problem of too much success. The lack of stress on an anti-fragile system makes the system weaker. I'm very, very bullish on ARK as a concept, the missing piece of the Lightning Network. The original design was very strong in privacy because it included all the Chaumian blind signature privacy by omission. It gives more incentives for the users and it gives more plausible deniability. Covenants make your structure non-interactive, which makes it safer, faster, cheaper, way better.
Do you have concerns that we lose the Cypherpunk ethos along the way, which even makes things like consensus damn near impossible? Joining me today is Giacomo Zucco, a Bitcoin OG and master educator who shaped the Cypherpunk movement through Plan B Network, delivering university-level Bitcoin courses worldwide and funding cutting-edge projects. In this episode, Giacomo reveals why ARK is a game-changing scaling breakthrough that's already fixing Lightning's pain points. He exposes the privacy strategy that's not just smarter, it's cheaper, and it gives you bulletproof deniability. And he shows how covenants could turbocharge Bitcoin's UX. Plus, in a shocking twist, Giacomo explains how Bitcoin's best friend is the modern socialist nation-state. All right. Good morning, Giacomo. Thank you so much for joining me today. Very excited to have this conversation. To kind of kick things off, I wanted to get your outlook kind of for 2026 in the sense that from both a technical or an education side, what are the major hurdles you think we still need to overcome for Bitcoin adoption? I feel like 2025 was not necessarily as exciting in terms of new people coming in as I would have liked. And what's still holding people back? What do we need to get to work on? What do we need to achieve in the next year?
I think we also have a problem of too much success. On one side, for example, things like privacy, self-custody, they didn't face enough opposition and enough persecution in order to be felt as really necessary. We had a little bit of a taste of what could be an adversarial environment for Bitcoin right before the Trump administration change. So with the checkpoint operation and samurai guys started the persecution, tornado guys in shitcoin wars, and then we had these we had stuff like Phoenix moving out of the US. This kind of concern about the future of custodial services, but then the dynamic completely changed between the continuing success of the ETFs and now the strategy companies and the new change in the friendly approach of the new administration in the US. Things change a little bit for the opposite. Now this is good short term because everybody likes to stay out of jail, except for the people that are already in. But like, let's say not new people are getting in trouble so far. But long term, that's usually the lack of solicitation, the lack of stress on an anti-fragile system makes the system weaker. So both technically and educationally, I think that in 2025 we didn't have a lot of stress on privacy as we used to, and we didn't have a lot of stress on self-custody. So much so that we wasted lots of time, me included, debating about spam wars and core versus nodes and stuff like that because we didn't have a lot of privacy debates and things like that. I think in 2026 things may get a little bit better in the sense that even if the US administration is still seen as pretty friendly, we have a lot of deterioration of the situation in the rest of the world. Now we have even just recently we have a lot of instability and upheavals that can be connected with people using tools for privacy and tools for decentralization and censorship resistant. We also see the BitChat discussion, which is not about Bitcoin specifically, but is also very telling. So we have the rest of the world going bad, including potentially Europe and the European Union, which is going pretty bad around here. I'm in Switzerland, luckily, but even Switzerland is not what it used to be. So the situation in the rest of the world is concerning about privacy and self-custody. So that may create a little bit of tension, maybe outside of the US into this direction. Also, I think that even just from a narrative cycle point of view, usually if we assume that the bull run is over and so the focus on the financial gains is going to be slower for a couple of years, maybe 3 years or something like that, assuming the cycle theory is still holding up. In that case, we will have people going back focusing on the basis and focusing on the fundamentals, which is mostly stuff like privacy, self-custody, scalability, stuff like that. Also, even if the narrative was not really there, technically speaking, there was some major change in 2025. Namely, I'm very, very bullish on ARK as a concept. I think it's many people see that as a challenging, as a new let's say competitor to the Lightning Network, but I see that as a new part of the Lightning Network, the missing piece of the Lightning Network as is. So the current network that we have, like what we call Lightning channels, Driapun channels, they tend to batch transactions in time. That means that a very few users, namely two, me and you, we can batch all the transactions that we're going to make back and forth through time, which is great. But what an ARK does is the opposite. In one single block time, so every block, ARK needs a block confirmation basically. But in one single transaction with potentially just one input and one output, you can batch confirmations for thousands of different users. So these two things are orthogonal, and put together, they can actually create the condition to the level of scalability and usability of the Lightning Network that we were imagining it intuitively in 2016, but the never really realized, mostly because the batching through time idea is very cool and very useful, but is limited because the actual liquidity dynamic are not like that. If you are a restaurant and I'm a client and we open a channel, our liquidity will always go all in this direction, and then we will always need rebalancing, and liquidity management is always pretty painful. While with something like ARK together, this changes a lot. Now, the reception of ARK has been good, but not really. Not really. There was not a lot of hype, I think, which is good because in some way, I think the Lightning Network may have suffered from too much overhype during the at the end of the block size wars. So we may have overpromised with this idea of Lightning fixing everything already since day zero forever. So the fact that ARK was launched, like the two main implementation, Arcade and the implementation by Second, they have been launched during the bull market, a little bit undertone compared to the financial news. That's actually a good thing. Notably, since I mentioned privacy, the two implementation of ARK today, Arcade and the one from ARK Labs and the one from Second, they both are pretty weak in privacy,
Really?
unfortunately. Yes, I guess is not the priority yet. They can be made way more private easily, but they are pretty weak so far. The original design that was published when the name was invented was very strong in privacy because it included all the Chaumian blind signature stuff that you will have like in a zero link mixer or like cooperative transaction coordinator. But the actual two implementations, they are basically the same as on-chain privacy. They also have block explorers, which is not ideal. Luckily, the good thing is that I think that ARCs will, as I said, they will coexist and integrate with channels. So they will also recover some of the privacy through channels. For example, right now, consider a Phoenix model. In a Phoenix model, right now fees are very low, so nobody care. But as soon as people start using the chain again, you may have a problem in resizing resizing the channel with Phoenix every time. In ARK, you can have a channel, even a very simple channel like a Spielman channel, which is an old construct before Drepun, and you can easily resize this Spielman channel with ARK, which will improve your, let's say, confirmation time. Because right now, in order to have finality in ARK, you have to wait for a block, like a normal on-chain transaction. In Lightning, after you have finality, you can carry on this finality forever until the channel is open, but you can just serve two users. So in a way, I think that let me wrap this up in this way. I think that the much of the research that we have been seeing going on low key during the last couple of years may start to become really handy now in a building phase during 2026. Another thing I could mention before I shut up is cross input signature aggregation. There was a lot of discussion about that a few years ago. Then everything stopped, mostly because some estimation by some skilled developers were pretty pessimistic in the savings of cross input signature aggregation. But now Blockstream came out a few months ago with a custom size signature aggregation paper, which is pretty impressive. And with that kind of potential saving in pay join, the discussion about this kind of software may go back to be really relevant, especially because in a non-trivial way, it could interact with the discussion about spam, about the within the discount, which was used in order to incentivize a spam transaction. So the two things may actually mix together a little bit. So technically speaking, I'm very optimistic. Education, I think we are in a golden age actually. Education, luckily, education doesn't need, unlike deployment of production-ready systems and businesses, education doesn't need real use cases today. You just need somebody to be willing to learn for the future. So we can easily build education for privacy, even in a very theoretical way. Of course, it's cool if we have kids using Bitcoin today in a proper way, but it's also good if you have university grade researchers researching on stuff long term. So I'm pretty happy of the way that the Bitcoin education developed during the last couple of years, which is also my most direct involvement in education efforts with Plan B.
That's beautiful. My God, Giacomo, there's so much for me to unpack there. Okay, so first and foremost, I do want to touch on the interaction between ARK and Lightning a little bit, because I've kind of come to terms with the fact, and I think it's a fine position, that there will be, in order to scale, that there's going to be some sort of trust trade-off. So for example, eCash and Liquid. And I'm very fine using both of those for small amounts. I use them all the time. I love Aqua Wallet and Bull app, and I'm using Bolt swaps in the background. And eCash has a lot of privacy built in as well. So I can see where these have value and we can scale up on top of them. But I'm curious in your viewpoint then, particularly if we could even add privacy to something like ARK, if that could be a component that we're looking to factor in there, will we need to give up trust in order to scale Bitcoin?
Well, I think that it was cool for a while to allow ourselves to consider trust in a binary term, like either it's totally trusted or it's totally trusted or trustless. But it's actually a spectrum, of course. The problem is we are trusting that a single actor is not controlling the system with how much resource deployment. So what is the budget for the attack, and what is the budget for the system to defend and to mutate into something more decentralized. So to make it more, a little bit more accurate, what is if you have the centralized part of the system which gets attacked, what is the budget, the cost for users to migrate? Are you going to lose all your money, or you're just losing some time to enter your private keys in some other systems? And that's the idea. So it's always a spectrum, and it's clear that if you have to defend $1 cent, you are not investing in $3 million for a safe, because it just doesn't match unless you are Scrooge McDuck and there is a lot of sentimental value on the cent. So you invest in security proportionally to the amount. So the idea of having this kind of smart wallets, Aqua is a good example of swapping using Lightning, but there is also Minibits using eCash, and there is Casio, and there was a Mutiny doing a lot of cool experiments, and there is Blitz Wallet doing a cool experiments. Now there is also the Breeze SDK, which is mixing Spark with ARK, with Liquid, with all of that. So these are very, very cool experiments. And I think that theoretically speaking, we could have a complete spectrum of security models, where you start with the basic security assumption, which just trust me, bro. So it's complete, like what it used to be wallet of Satoshi, like trust me, bro. I just give you my money. Then there is eCash. eCash is a slight improvement of trust requirement, because the mint cannot confiscate individually, because they don't know how much you have, so they can just run away with all the money. And secondarily, you always can prove that you had this cash token that was not redeemed. So they are like provably honest. Like they can run away with the money, but you can prove that, which you cannot do in a database. Like if Kraken or Bitfinex or whatever, they just tell you you have nothing, you cannot prove much, technically speaking. In eCash, you have a token that the mint refused to convert, which is more cash-like in a way. Then you move again and you go to something like the state chain, like Spark, which is now very famous, but there was also Mercury layer, for example, and Mercury wallet is still active. State chain is nice because the coordinator cannot run away with the money, but they can collude with some of the participants to double spend, to rewind, basically to bring back history, to rewind time and they may scam you in that way, and that's the state chain. Then there is something like ARK and the Lightning channel. And as I say, these have like some kind of orthogonal trade-offs. In ARK, you have to wait for a block to really get finality, so you have more trust in the short term. But then you can, for example, when you want to exit, you can share the fee of your exit cost with thousands of people in theory. So even in high fee scenarios, you may be able to do unilateral exit by sharing your fees. In a Lightning channel, after the confirmation, you are set for life. But if you have to exit unilaterally, you have to pay the entire fee. So assuming that we get to $1,000 equivalent of on-chain fees, Lightning channels to close and resize it, that becomes pretty burdensome. Then if we move from that, well, I guess before eCash between eCash and the state chain concept, there's something like Liquid. It's basically like eCash with the weaker privacy. The difference being that they cannot do fractional reserve. A Cashew Mint can do fractional reserve, while Liquid cannot. Your Liquid node can always actually tell precisely the amount of circulating representation of Bitcoin. So this is a progression. And in theory, we could have a Lightning network where we swoop across all the security models as needed. So if I pay you a cent, my wallet will understand, and your wallet will understand that I just have to give you an eCash token. But if I pay you $1, maybe we go Spark. And if I pay you $10, maybe we go ARK and Lightning Driapun. And if we and so on. Now, even if in theory we could have a complete spectrum, I think that that realistically the market may settle into some kind of Goldilocks zones of this spectrum. So there would be some kind of privileged parts of the spectrum. And in my opinion, a combination of channels like Spielman channels or Driapun and ARK is so is very powerful. It's at the center of this trade-off between on-chain. So let me just spitball here. We may end up with something like eCash for very, very small, ARK and Spielman channels for everything in between, and on-chain for very, very big. When we have these three big clusters, I'm not sure something like Spark or Mercury or Liquid will be needed long term. But of course, the market never behaves totally rationally, and you also have inertia. Like Liquid is already used, and Spark is going pretty aggressive. So maybe something will survive just for sake of inertia.
CoinKite has been in the game for years, creating hands down the best and most secure hardware when it comes to securing your Bitcoin. The Coldcard Q is an absolute powerhouse and my daily driver, and it's ideal for newcomers and advanced users alike. The Tab Signer gives you a low-cost, user-friendly option for those just getting started or for convenience when traveling. You can head to coinkite.com and use code BTC Sessions for discounts, or simply scan the QR code on the screen to get started right away. One company I like pointing people to when they ask about Bitcoin mining is Abundant Mines. They were founded by Bo and Christine Turner after losing over $500,000 to broken promises in the mining industry. And they built their hosting model to remove the usual headaches. With Abundant Mines, you own your machines and keep 100% of the Bitcoin you mine. There's no revenue share, no hidden skims. Pricing is simple. One flat monthly fee covers power, parts, labor, and repairs. They also guarantee uptime. If a machine goes down, their hash rate redirect system routes hash power from their fleet, so earnings don't just stop. And every machine is insured at full replacement value. Everything is hosted in the US, powered by Hydro, and mining equipment may qualify for 100% year one bonus depreciation. Learn more at abundantmines.com/sessions.
No, that makes perfect sense. I mean, I kind of agree. I think like between on-chain, Lightning, ARK, and then eCash, like you kind of have the whole spectrum covered, right? Like you can do a lot of volume on Lightning and still be good, and then anything massive on-chain. That makes perfect sense to me. And I would agree. It even seems like in that case, like I don't think I really need Liquid anymore. Like it's very convenient right now because it's implemented and because I can use it. But if those other methods are kind of inbuilt and kind of ubiquitous throughout the market, I think I'm good. I think I'm solid at that point in time. I did
Well,
want
let
to
me.
go ahead.
Sorry if I'm being too talkative.
No,
Just
go.
feel free to stop me. There is also another spectrum which is orthogonal to this to a degree. So now we listed the things that the coordinator may do to you, with your money. So escape with everything or just double spend. And then there is also the point of who the coordinator is and how do you prevent the coordinator from acting badly. And one of those is, for example, the fact that instead of a single key, you have a federation. And this is a model which is used in Fedi for eCash. So let's like Fedi is like Cashew plus a federation. Then Liquid already includes a federation, but it may not because you may deploy an element sidechain without a federation with a single signer. And then Arcade doesn't have a federation right now, but they are considering to add one. And then Spark has a federation with an interesting model in which you have key deletion. So even if just 1 out of 3 of the federation is good, so you have this federation stuff. And then you have trusted hardware, trusted execution environments, HSMs. This idea is interesting because delegated at the remote attestation. This is very interesting because if you think about that, when Alfini was inventing reusable proof of work, they didn't have the concept of the blockchain. So Alfini's server was using remote attestation and trusted execution environment to prove you that he was being honest to some degree. And we can still add this kind of HSM structure on ARK. For example, Arcade is considering to add it. And Liquid, together with the Federation, they also have HSMs, which are these fiduciary hardwares. So in a way, maybe there is the cryptographic construction is one thing that we listed before. And on top, there is the things you do to the coordinator to make it less trusted, including hardware, trust delegation, or federation models. So the total permutations of security models becomes pretty complex. And again, the market will probably just select one. So maybe Arcade, let's say in 3 years, ARK implementation with the same HSM as Liquid may make Liquid obsolete, but they need to reuse at least the federation model, for example, which ARK doesn't have. So that's a little bit more complex to predict.
Interesting. Yeah, we'll be very curious to see how things evolve. I'm also trying to think of the privacy implications. I do want to touch on a little bit as well too. Like, I often wonder, like, because we have basically the cost of the on-chain fees, you wouldn't necessarily have like coin joins and extra transactions just kind of running all the time. But if there's a really low fee environment, if we're dealing with something like ARK and Lightning and eCash, like I wonder if it'll reach a point where your wallet will be kind of like constantly mixing some of your coins on your behalf just to obscure where things are coming from. Like, does privacy get easier as we scale out in these additional layers that we might be even maybe like for somebody who's new coming to space, they would just be automated in the background?
Yes, yeah, I would say that the privacy is almost aligned with the reverse of security to some degree, in the sense that if you have eCash, that's perfectly private. It's not entirely true because in the spectrum I designed, a normal database like Kraken Exchange, that's private for the outside world, but it's pretty non-private for the coordinator, which can leak and will eventually leak. eCash is pretty private. Liquid a little bit less so because the amounts are so many blinded, but the connection, the transaction graph are not. The state chain are, yeah, that's a pretty complex privacy design, but let's say it's a little bit like Liquid to a degree. And then ARK, as it was promoted initially, it was more private, but as it's deployed now is less private. And on chain is very, very low privacy, again, because you have this very strong correlation. So privacy is a little bit all around the place. But I agree with you in general. So I mentioned before the idea of CISA, cross simple secret aggregation. I think there are two ideas for privacy on Bitcoin. One is privacy by obfuscation, which means my information, my transaction information hit the global consensus layer, so they get replicated everywhere forever, but I hide them into more input, more output, coin join rounds, ricochet, fake pay join, additional changes to screw up heuristics, or I hide them cryptographically, like in Monero or in Zcash. So I obfuscate them. So I have very big signatures, very big keys, very big states like the TXO set of Monero. Everything becomes very big. That I think is bad long term, because in that case, privacy is in trade-off with fees. In order to get more privacy, I have to pay more because I put data on chain. If I want to be private, I have to put more data on chain, like to do a new CoinJoin round, and that will cost me. So first, users will not do it if they are not really committed, and when they're really committed, usually they have a reason to be, and so they attract more regulatory scrutiny. And you don't have plausible deniability. If the regulators comes to you and say, "Why are you implementing this?" You have to say, "Because of privacy." And regulators are usually they're like, privacy is bad. While there is another strategy, which is privacy by omission, which is I don't hit the global consensus with some information. Some information remains locally. It doesn't need to go global in the chain. So Lightning or ARK are something like that. ARK less so, because they created the block explorer, which was not ideal, but I understand why they did it business wise. But from the point of view of privacy, it's bad. In Lightning, we create a channel. The information never hits the chain.
Yeah.
So it's in this case, by being private, we save money. Something similar goes to eCash, for example, or to Liquid to some degree. But Liquid is a little bit more complex. But in eCash, for example, we save money we save fees, or in Lightning, by omitting information. So in that case, if an exchange implements Lightning, the regulator will ask, why are you not writing everything on chain? Well, it's not for privacy; it's for cost saving and time confirmation timing. You have a very strong plausible deniability. You are more private because you are sharing less information on chain, and you are sharing less information because you want to save money and confirmation times. So I think that there are at least two orthogonal visions of privacy. One is actually in trade-off with fees, and the other one goes together, and that's the latter is clearly better because it gives more incentives for the users, and it gives more plausible deniability to the users and to the providers, of course. Cross-input signature aggregation soft fork will go in the second direction because it will allow the users to omit signature information by getting privacy and also getting a cost saving, let's say.
That's very interesting. Kind of on that note, do you think my sense is we're not going to get any sort of consensus on a soft fork anytime soon?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think I'm saying this. I'm trying to play this optimistic act because consensus building also requires some level of optimism. But I agree with you; it's very hard to find it. And also, if right now you have the spam debate, which is creating all these proposals that have, in my opinion, have absolutely no legs and no future about soft forks exclusively for spam mitigation. I don't think they will go anywhere. Then you have core people, literal core developers. They are mostly committed to this kind of consensus cleanup, janitorial support, which are useful and can improve Bitcoin, but are not feature related. They are more geek stuff. And then you have the strong support for covenants, which is not that yet, which is still was strongest a few years. A few years ago, it seemed like we were very close to reach a consensus, but then consensus for covenants is still not there. Clearly, there is not consensus in how, even if there is a very strong agreement in whether it's desirable. Most people will tell you yes, but many people will disagree on when and how exactly. So and now, luckily, I heard a few people starting to talk about Chisa again, and I am a Chisa guy, so I will push for that. And so I agree with you. With this kind of premise, the only thing that I can hope for, which is is very optimistic, but I remember Taproot. When Taproot was proposed, it was a brilliant idea because the idea of must Merkelize syntax abstract tree for better smart contract construction and privacy was already circulating since years, and there were three different BIPs, two very known and one more niche, not yet assigned, and there was no agreement. And then there were a few proposals for Schnorr, and then there were a few proposals for commitment scheme like pay to contract and stuff like that. And with one single night, Maxwell and then other people like Sipa did, these guys in the peak of their Bitcoin creativity, they proposed an idea that was putting everything together in a very elegant way. So Taproot, even if most users didn't even understand what it was actually the merging of very or different ideas into one single consistent elegant solution that we are still starting to almost nothing uses Taproot yet. I use Taproot because, well, but there's also like, for a while that wasn't entirely true. Like nobody was using the software. It was activated in 2021, but now I can say I use it every day because I am a very strong Phoenix user, and Phoenix uses Taproot channels to open and close right now, to save on fees and also to save a little bit on privacy. And I am a user of the greeting security multi-sig time lock wallets like Liana and others, and they use Taproot constructively. And the two implementations of ARK, they both use, which I also use. I use Arcade wallet in production to pay for my coffee in Lugano, and they both use ARK. So I can say I do use Taproot every day in my life right now. But of course, it's still very early. But let's see.
You'll see how it evolves there. I'm actually kind of curious. I want to just double click on that for a second too, because my understanding for CTV really was coming from the perspective of ARK. That I remember hearing arguments that if we had CTV, we could get ARK, which is no longer necessary at this point in time. So I'm not actually opposed to covenants in any sort of way, but I don't know the use case. Could you give me maybe an example of like why that might be beneficial still at this point?
Yeah, that's also true for ARK, but really for everything else, including Lightning and Lightning Symmetry. If we want to dumb it down to something very compact, the notion is that with CTV or equivalently powerful covenants, you can make synchronous interactive things asynchronous and non-interactive, which changes a lot in terms of usability, UX, and also to some degree security. For example, a Lightning channel, in order to open a Lightning channel with you, we need to be both on chain and co-sign each other's stuff. That means that I cannot pay you while you are off chain, and then if you come on chain, if fees are low, I wait for you to be on chain and then I open a channel where I'm off chain. We cannot do this, which means that we need servers. Basically, we need people with servers to stay in between and wait for the like we have these trampoline nodes with LSP services that needs to stay in between. While even in ARK is the same. If you have to pay with ARK, you need without covenant. So what was called Clark, covenant-less ARK, which is what in production right now. You need a large number of people to be online in the same party in order to send money. So this interactivity cost is 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 something that we can tolerate and we can build upon. Is not a disaster, but is a cost. If you have covenants, you can make most of the things non-interactive. So you can do stuff in which I do something here. If there is a covenant, everybody signs in a different time, and then you don't need everybody to come together with the same at the same time for the same round. You have a lot of constructions that are not really similar to ARKs, but are still very interesting, like cold channels. There's if you look up cold channels on in general timeout trees or a different design for payment pools, and even from the point of view of Lightning, if you think about L2 channels, that are channels that are very easy they become way better to backup and to be transformed into multi-party. L2 required any SIGASH, no input, any private APO. That was it's not considered a covenant, but it is a covenant. Any private is a covenant. It's just this is not an opcode like CTV, but it is a SIGASH modification. But it's still a covenant. So in general, covenants make your structure non-interactive, which makes it safer, faster, cheaper, way better as UX. So we can build everything without stronger covenants. I think that the key to understand this is that a Lightning channel, Driapun channel today is a covenant. It is literally covenant because by creating a pre-signed transaction in which I allow you to get out with some hash secret, I'm creating a covenant, but it's a pre-signed covenant. Pre-signed covenants require pre-signing, which is a expensive interaction process. While the covenants that people are talking about, like CTV, they do not require pre-signing. something similar about vaults and security vaults and inheritance processes. Like right now, I'm satisfied. I'm satisfied of the inheritance processes we can do with Liana
Yeah.
and just time locks, but they require a lot of pre-signing, which means backing up the signed transactions, and it also means so it complicates the backup process, and it also requires redeposit every now and then on chain. With covenants, you can have the same, but without the pre-signing. So with better backup capabilities. So like a future with CTV or maybe CTV and check signature first from stack, LNS, this kind of combination. A feature like that will probably allow people to have these very strong contracts without complex backups. Like you with your 12 words, you can recover your stuff.
Yeah.
Without covenants, you need to back up the state, and you have this interactivity problem.
Okay, very interesting. So it's just a huge improvement on what we can already do. They'll make it probably easier, even in terms of adoption. And again, I like the idea of legacy planning behind there as well too. I did want to pivot for 1 second. We touched on it a bit earlier as well. So we talked about Europe and Switzerland and privacy and the things that are going on there a little bit. So two things. One, is Europe as bad as I think it is from everything that I'm being shown in my feed currently? And then number two, I thought Switzerland was still a little bit of a safe haven. Are things turning a little bit?
So in Europe, things are pretty bad in the sense that in the US, of course, there is an overreaching state. As always, there is a creeping state. Maybe there is the most powerful surveillance infrastructure of the planet right now, even more powerful than China. But at least there is a strong cultural resistance. There is like the current government party is officially against the CBDC. The concept of cash is still defended ideologically. There is still a very strong rooted ideological defense for the idea of individual privacy. There is this kind of American ideology about that. In Europe, I would think that the surveillance apparatus is maybe less powerful than the US one and the China one, but still it's pretty powerful as well. The regulation is almost as bad. The financial regulation, which is not great in the US, is also not great in Europe, and is getting worse. So all these kind of licenses, of course, something as ugly as the bit license in the US is very hard to come up with, but they're working on that pretty fast. So European Union is copying the US in terms of financial restriction, which also impacts privacy a lot. But on top of that, there is almost zero uh, social and cultural resistance to that. So there is no public debate in which privacy is proudly defended in a European typical media or like a political talk show. There is not the party of privacy. Privacy is for bad guys, for criminals, and there is no single redeeming quality of privacy in the public discourse. So that's worse, I would say. Switzerland is better in different terms. It's better because there is still better regulation. Financial privacy used to be great here. Now it decayed very fast from the late 80s, and then after 9/11 and the Patriot Act and the fight between the US and Switzerland, the bank secrecy, so it collapsed. But even after collapse, the general state of privacy is not great, but is better than the US and better than the EU. Well, better than the US, debatedly, because if you have a Delaware company and you are a US citizen, you may have better privacy for outside countries than Switzerland. But let's say that on average is pretty good on privacy in comparative terms. Also, there is some level of cultural. So also the surveillance infrastructure is not very developed. We don't have a Palantir in Switzerland. Of course there are crypto AG stuff like that, but let's say that the institutions in Switzerland are not yet equipped to do that level of intensive. There is still some kind of shy approach to invading citizens' privacy. And then there is some level, not as strong as the US, but I see some level of cultural reaction and cultural defense of privacy. You can talk with people that will tell you privacy is good, privacy was good, and it's a divided. It's like in the US, it's divided because a part of the public discourse in Switzerland is we lost the war with the US about privacy. We have to give up the bank secrecy to everybody now, France, Italy, Germany. So we have been beaten hardly once. Let's not go back there. So let's normalize Switzerland. Let's become more European. Let's try to become. So some Swiss politicians are embarrassed to be different, and they try to push forward to become as normalized as possible. While there is a little bit of part, especially in the public opinion, and also a little bit of political representation, which is kind of like, well, but actually that was our thing. Like
Yeah.
Switzerland was privacy, so let's go back there. At least if you talk about privacy publicly in a talk show in Switzerland, you are not considered crazy. You may be considered a little bit not up to date, but not crazy. Like if you do that in Italy, I mean, I come from there. It's hopeless.
When I first got into Bitcoin, I was overwhelmed. The jargon, the security risks, the fear that one mistake could cost everything. I remember staring at my screen and wondering, are my keys safe? Did I do this right? That experience is why I started BTC Sessions. For over a decade, this channel has helped millions of people like you learn how to use and secure Bitcoin. But I realized something. For many people, videos aren't enough. Everyone learns differently. Some need to ask questions in real time as an expert walks through their setup, their goals, and their threat model. And certain things like advanced cold storage, inheritance planning, privacy, and node or mining setups often can't be fully solved by watching another tutorial. So I built BTC Mentor. I recruited the best Bitcoin educators on the planet to work with you one-on-one. Real experts, real answers, personalized hands-on guidance tailored to your exact situation. Whether you're brand new or building a complex setup, we meet you where you're at and walk with you step by step. By the end, you don't just hope your Bitcoin is safe, you know it is. If you're ready for that level of confidence, then head to btcmentor.io and book a call with us today.
Okay, good. Well, at least Switzerland was the last country to go off the gold standard as well, too. Like, it would make sense that it would have at least some cultural roots and still be like, no, we like cash and hard money, so let's just leave everybody a little bit alone there. Well, my dark side hope in this little moment here is with everything going on in Europe and with increasingly getting more Orwellian as well too. We talked earlier about like Bitcoin needing an adversary. That's really where it kind of shines. That the pain points tend to be kind of what motivates people to actually learn about these sort of things and come to Bitcoin too. So my hope is that if Europe is getting worse, at the very least, we might be onboarding some more Bitcoiners over the next year or so, which does bring me to, I do want to talk about Plan B. For anyone that might not be familiar too, because you have this amazing education network set up here. What exactly are you doing at Plan B, and how is that going? Are we getting any scared Europeans coming through the door yet?
So yeah, so Plan B started a few years ago in the city of Lugano. So it was a very Swiss thing to start with. And it was an agreement between Tether and the city of Lugano, and later on Fulgur Venture, which is a great venture capital firm in the Bitcoin world, also joined. And it started with the Plan B Forum, which was just a conference, the Plan B Summer School, which was an educational project for getting students from all the world in Switzerland to learn about Bitcoin, the adoption of Bitcoin in the city of Lugano, so a merchant project with more than 400 Lightning Network accepting merchants, and a Plan B hub, which is where I'm now. Like, here's me here. So now I'm in the Lugano Plan B hub, which is a beautiful building that you should come to visit in Lugano, and the Plan B VC fund, which is a VC fund to and also a non-profit foundation to give money to Bitcoin things. So it started like very multifaceted. And then they involved me and my team more recently, and now we created this concept of Plan B network, which is the idea of not only improving and growing and strengthening the activity here in Lugano, which we still do, but also to expand that globally a little bit. So if you go on planb.network, you can find also the Plan B Academy, which is an operation that will translate free courses in dozens of different languages all around the world, and we try to boost the local meetups, local devs, relationship with universities. We wrote the Bitcoin master classes courses, like executive master courses, in the University of Taipei at DUT, in the University of Turin, Polytechnic of Torino. We are trying to work right now. We have some working being done with MIT and the George W. university in Washington D.C. So of course, University of Salvador. We are discussing with Tokyo. So there's also, and of course, the local university here, USI and SUPSI of Italy and Switzerland. So there is a grassroots stuff with the program No Nation. We are doing a lot of education in high school, basically. So these great guys are going to hundreds of schools in El Salvador, mostly, to teach students of high middle school how to set up full nodes. So No Nation is also a great achievement. Now the next thing, so this is Plan B.
Yeah.
Next things in if you are interested to follow, go to planb.network and stay tuned, especially for three things. The first thing is the Plan B forum, which is started as a conference in Lugano and is still a conference in Lugano every October, late October, and it was great last October. But then it expanded to El Salvador, San Salvador. So 31 of January, you can go on. You just search engine Plan B forum El Salvador, and you find it. Then during El Salvador, we will publish the Cypher Tank, which is it's a wordplay between Shark Tank and Cypherpunk. It sounds better for me because I don't have a good pronunciation of tank and pank, but still, is the wordplay is supposed to be that. So Cypher Tank is a very high quality production format where some of the best projects in Bitcoin ask for money, but instead of just doing that through open sets, grants, or geyser projects, we did it with a Shark Tank kind of format with incredible judges like Paolo Arduino, Adam Beck, Preston Pish, and Matt Odell, and Jack Mallers. So all the best judges you can imagine interacting with these young guys asking for support, financial support. So this was recorded already and is going to be published on the 31 of January. Well, thank you, Mira. It will be 5 episodes. So the first episode will come out on the 31. Now, if you're coming to the Plan B forum in El Salvador on the second day, the 31, during the lunch break, we will gather into a room on the main stage, and we will basically do a premiere of the first episode, and then the one episode will be published every week during February, and then the great final with the winners will be published on the end of February, and the winners will come to Lugano in March to start a local residency program. And I want to keep the tension up, so I cannot say who the winners are, but it's a very good I'm very happy about the project. I think it would be very nice, and it could create a new way to do something that the Bitcoin ecosystem is doing already, which is giving money to the Bitcoin ecosystem is very generous in terms of money, but is not structured, and these startups are a little bit left alone with resources, but there is no strong incubation method, there is not a strong acceleration method, there is not a very strong there are residency programs for core developers like Chain Code, but for businesses and grassroots projects, we are trying to create something as compelling. And then, so the first thing is come to the forum. Second is stay tuned for the Cypher Tank. If you're not in the forum, just go on planb.network on the 31 lunchtime, El Salvador time. You will get the first episode for free. It will be published probably on our Rumble and YouTube channels, but you will see it hopefully everywhere. And then the other thing is that we are starting again this year our Plan B program. Again, if you go on planb.network, planb.academy, you find it. The Plan B program is a program for people that want to start working in Bitcoin companies. So what we do is a generic introduction to Bitcoin to professionals. So the target is not random people. The target is like marketers, developers, lawyers, people with already strong professionality. We teach them Bitcoin, and then we give them tutoring by Bitcoin companies like Blockstream, Bitfinex, and big Bitcoin companies, or smaller like Breeze and all the others. And they give them assignments, and then we select the 21 best developers and the 21 best business developers, and we send them to Lugano for the summer school in June in order to stay in the same building this building with
Yep.
the mentors and the business people. So this the introductory lecture for the Plan B program starts on the 3rd of February. I will be in El Salvador still, and I will do from there, from the Bitcoin Beach, likely. I will do the first introductory lecture that will be free and open, but then everything from there will be paid. That's a premium program. So we want committed people. There will be a tuition, there will be scholarships. Then just to be very ideologic, after 1 year, all the content of the school will be published online, free and open source, like we did the year before and the year before that. So eventually all the content finishes up open source, but we try to give some kind of privilege, some kind of premium experience to committed professionals.
That's incredible. There's so much. Okay, there's two questions I want to ask. My first one, most importantly, too, because I know you can't give away what's happened with like the Cypher Tank in terms of like who won and what kind of projects they were coming forward with. But of all the judges there, because there's always one, who was the hard ass? Who was the one who played the jerk during the show?
That's our question. You have to see, you have to watch the format, of course, to take your consideration. But Max Kadum from Hodl Hodl is a boss. Like he's hard to please. Oleg Mikalski from Full Group Venture is not always easy to please. I think Jack Lee was also challenging a little bit. But you know, some judges were very sweet from the personal point of view. Like Jack Mallers is a very sweet boy. But the feedback was intense. But I cannot leak anything more. Now you have to see it for yourself.
Okay, I'll absolutely check it out. And I kind of want to pivot off that a little bit too, because there's so much we talked about in terms of like education, and we got the Cypher Tank, and then we got consensus as well too. I'm wondering, do you have any concerns, like as we're purposely growing the tent, right? We're purposely trying to bring more people into Bitcoin to educate them, to take self-custody, to take control, to take control of their lives. Do you have concerns that we lose the cypherpunk ethos along the way, which even makes things like consensus damn near impossible? And the one for me, and I don't know if I can articulate this properly too, but I found myself at the end of last year kind of resenting the suit coiners a little bit. And the reason being, it was something along the lines of, there is no value for you to talk about in terms of an investment if we don't focus on unconfiscatability, on censorship resistant, on privacy. Like the value of Bitcoin comes from everything that the cypherpunks did and are doing. And I feel like we've kind of lost that way. It has me a little down, has me a little concerned at some points, but I figured you'd have a better view of the situation.
So clearly there is a trade-off, a general trade-off not unique to Bitcoin between adoption and purity. That's something that every subculture will face. Even if you talk about heavy metal or I don't know biker culture, you have the same problem. Either you remain niche and pure, and you can feel the purity and also the reason your movement started, because your subculture started as an answer to a problem, to an issue, to some defect in the world. So you propose something radically different, and now if you stay niche, you don't transform the world as much. If you grow and you incorporate everything, you do affect the world more, but then the world affects you back. And there is a very nice talk in Baltic on a Badger by CoinSure about subcultures in general and this kind of trade-off. Bitcoin faces it just like other subcultures, so adoption or purity. And I found myself in either side of the spectrum, because rhetorically, every time we're like, yeah, we have to reach out, we have to do mass adoption. And then sometimes I read articles like the beautiful article by there was Francis Puyot with the hard path, and there was also Zvesky with the jobs, the remnant taking from Francis. So this idea of the remnant, the small niche that should be pure, whatever, like Noah's Ark. And everybody else, if they don't want to float, they can just die in the water. We build the ark for somebody that wants to come. We don't have to beg people to come into the ark. So I found myself in both directions, a bit oscillating. But usually, I think that as a company, you tend to be biased toward adoption and compromise, and that enlarging the tent. And as an individual, I'm growing into more and more intolerant and remnant every day. The good thing, I think, that the positive conclusion is that you can look at the dilution of the cypherpunk ideas in two ways. In relative terms, it's true, it's diluted for sure. But then you can look at it in absolute terms, and we are freaking winning. So Look at it in this way. I was doing Bitcoin meetups in 2013. 10 people in a room. Three were hardcore cypherpunk. One was a curious trader. One was a curious banker, even back there. And one was an e-commerce expert. One just wanted to buy some weed and was there just for that. And you have the 10 people. Now, you do a meetup right now. You have 100 people. Of these, 9 are hardcore cypherpunk. Now, in relative terms,
Yes.
this shrank a lot. Like now it is 1/10. Before it used to be almost 1/3. So we had the reduction. We have the dilution and the reduction in our core value. But we were 3. Now we're 9. There is that. I have more hardcore badass cypherpunk friends now that I used to have in 2013. Way more. So in absolute terms, we are winning, and that's natural because if you think about the adoption cycles, which also are reflected to some degree in the price cycles. Uh, Even if I started ideologically first and then I met Bitcoin, for most people it's the other way around. They adopt the tool superficially and then they can grow into the values and the subculture. And usually when you start, you just use it, you just want to get rich quick or to buy weed or something. And then maybe your exchange will escape with the money, and so you learn it a bit, and then your tax agency will write you with some kind of vexatory request, and then you learn privacy, and then you also maybe want to you make friend with some guy that ends up in jail because they just develop a wallet, so you become passionate about the cause, so you can actually, and then you read because people will show you the Bitcoin standard, and then you buy it because you're interested in Bitcoin. But then you read about the Austrian schools of economics, and then you are curious about this Mises guy, and you may end up reading the human action. Of course, this is not for everybody. This is a very strict, it's a very narrow funnel, but it can happen. And the same goes with reading up Tim May and the Cypherpunk and Eric Hughes and Julian Assange and all the other things. And at the end, you end up with the stronger core. So I think that as long as the core survives and keeps growing in absolute terms, we're still better off. Without Bitcoin, the number of cypherpunk people and cypherpunk educated people, cypherpunk developers, and a number of Austrian educated people and also Austrian investors and savers and economic developers would be way, way smaller. It's impossible for us to prevent adoption. Adoption is happening even by nation states and shit corners and stock markets. We cannot prevent it. The thing is that individually we should always try not to sell our souls for it's a low term preference thing. Let's try to get to maximize the profit for everybody in the long term instead of just selling our soul for a quick buck right now. So it's just a question of being patient and try to be personally uncompromising, but accepting that from the point of view of relative weight, the original ideologic bunch is going to be less relatively representative.
That is probably the most optimistic take I've ever heard. I actually feel pretty good about that because you're right. In terms of absolutes, we've got more, and I'm kind of with you. I was an ANCAP before I found Bitcoin, but for a lot of people, it's their first introduction to Austrian economics. It's like, oh my God, do I have some books for you? Let's talk more. Okay, I would like you to please save me again. Take that wonderful optimistic energy because there's one other thing that kind of bugs me along the same lines, and I'm hoping you have a great answer for it too. My other fear and concern in Bitcoin is like, particularly over the last year, fees have been unbelievably low. There's not a lot of activity happening on chain. My worry is that basically any adoption that we have had, or any sort of like a large proportion of it, is just going into the ETFs. It's just going into the Klaus Schwab accounts. It's just being held by custody third parties, that this is the avenue that most people are coming in. And they're not viewing it particularly as money, right? It's not being viewed with the intent of money or medium of exchange. It's not really viewed as solving the problem. It's only being viewed as an investment. So I want that beautiful optimistic answer. My fear is that Bitcoin just becomes the like store of value. It's just another asset that you have in your account, but you never really get past that point to what it can really do in terms of enabling that personal freedom. Tell me I'm wrong.
So I would give you an optimistic answer by being even more pessimistic, because I think that you
Ooh.
just initially, but then I will finish up optimistic. So I think that you just listed one half of the reason. I think there are three main reasons fees are low. Actually, let's say four. First reason, we are actually using the Lightning Network. So the scalability solutions we created, now we are using them, which is good. It's intended. We can also achieve a better privacy, so that's good. I personally do spend Bitcoin on chain very, very rarely this day, unless I have to do something big. I will use Lightning also for thousands of dollars, and it works. So Lightning, for the hardcore people, for the hardcore Bitcoiners, Lightning is reality. Lightning works, and of course, we created that to prevent clogging of the scarce block space, and now it's working as intended. Then, second point, there was most likely, very realistically, an artificial pumping of the fees during the block size wars due to this exogenous Bitmain lead spam attack. So this is very controversial, can get conspiratorial, but I think there is an element of a artificial pumping of the fees, which gave us a glimpse of the future. I think we are lucky that we're not there yet, but it showed us where we may be. And it's important that it did, because otherwise we may still be in the delusion that block space will be eternal and free and infinite forever. Instead, it's not like that. And even with Lightning, when fees were very high again because of the Rune NFTs and whatever, you people that had non-consensual closure of the Lightning channel, they lost a lot of money in fees, because they had you have a channel, suddenly it's gone with with $90 fees. So that's bad, and it's good that we get reminded that that's the future of a scarce asset like block space. So that's the second reason. The third reason is the reason you're mentioning, which is ETFs and treasury companies. Treasury companies are also a hack, because of course there's this, you can buy Bitcoin, but you can also borrow fiat to buy Bitcoin. But if you borrow fiat as an individual, you will have a very bad rate. But if you do that as a listed public company, you will have a better rate. So if instead of buying Bitcoin, you buy shares in a company that can borrow fiat very cheaply in order to buy Bitcoin, you may have an arbitrage there. And many people try to use this arbitrage. And also ETF, because they're boomers and they're used to do that, and they're not used to do self-custody and stuff. Then there is another part that I think you missed, which is the short-term blessing, but long-term tragedy of
Ooh.
the stable coins. Many people
Mm.
so people don't use Bitcoin for payments mostly. They use it for saving. That's okay. But some people do use Bitcoin for payments, and they needed to do it for remittance, e-commerce, gaming. A lot of markets needed Bitcoin for real. And the alternative fiat was blocked by legal reasons, not technical reasons. You're underage, you are from Somalia, you just cannot use PayPal or Venmo. You are American or 30 years old, you just use Venmo. You don't need Bitcoin. But you are not privileged, you cannot use Venmo. Now, Bitcoin was going, I think, well in that direction. I remember personally a lot of e-commerce dealing with Bitcoin, a lot of remittance schemes with Bitcoin. Gambling was using Bitcoin a lot. A lot of industries were using Bitcoin a lot. Stablecoin gave you the same short-term delusion of freedom. Well, the same short-term freedom in the secondary market for real, almost the same, because controlling the secondary market of stablecoins, mostly USDT, is legally not feasible right now. So, if you are an African 17-year-old boy, you cannot have Venmo, you cannot have a bank account easily. You can have Bitcoin, and you can have this kind of Polygon wallet or whatever with USDT on top. And since people are scared of volatility, and that's something that we can shrug off, but we are privileged, because if you can look at Bitcoin long term, and you can look at the 4 years price cycles, you know that the volatility of Bitcoin is a very good volatility. It's upwards, so that's beautiful. But you need to be able to survive 4 years. You need to have a buffer. If you are a business that has to pay the providers next month, and you receive the money from the client the month before, and now you're 40% down, that's a problem. And also brand recognition of the dollar is still strong. The dollar may be seen as very unstable for us because we know about the devaluation of 97%, the central bank, the Fed. We know Austrian economics. We know is going to hyperinflate eventually. But for a typical person in Venezuela or in Ukraine or in Africa, they look at their local. They look at the Zimbabwe dollar and they look at the US dollar. Well, that's pretty stable. So the brand recognition as something stable of the dollar is still strong. And I think that stable coins, they subtracted a lot of volumes from payments. So it's not, as you said, that the reason fees are low is that nobody is using Bitcoin as money. Is that they are using Bitcoin as investment and as saving and as payments in some specific strategic markets. But in both cases, they are not using Bitcoin anymore. They're using this kind of Bitcoin copies that are this kind of shitcoin based stable coins and this kind of ETF schemes. And I think we have a great this may seem even more pessimistic, but I'm very optimistic. The reason I am is that we have a strong ally, the best friend of Bitcoin, which is the modern socialist nation state.
Go on.
The modern socialist nation state cannot stop inflating, cannot stop censoring, and it cannot stop money from hyperinflate and from hyper censor especially under political unrest and political instability. So the idea that suddenly the US dollar will just remain perceived as stable forever and the secondary market of stable coin will remain free as it is today. I mean, regulators are stupid because they are not selected by great incentives. So to some degree, they're not the brightest, but they're not so stupid. So after a while, they just see that there is a primary market which is regulated and the secondary market which is totally free, and they go to Circle and Tether and they just tell them, guys, you have to stop, and they will stop. And if they don't, there's still the fact that one reason, for example, that Tether can provide this great service for a lot of third world population almost free is because they get their money from the T-bills of the treasury. And if that changes with different interest rates in the treasury, which will happen eventually, that's also something that will stop the party. So I think that short term, ETFs and treasury companies and stable coins, they are providing the market, they're giving some supply to a demand, which is ultimately good, but it is diluting the value of Bitcoin short term. Long term, all these things are not sustainable for several reasons, because the state, when the state is threatened, they will confiscate ETFs. They did that with gold. They will do that with Bitcoin as well. And if it's not the state, it's other bands of criminals, like people maybe hacking Coinbase. You get Coinbase belly up, you get like 90% of the ETFs insolvent. So it's inherently fragile. So we don't have to be scared about. I think that my optimism is the fact that unstable and unsustainable alternatives are draining value from Bitcoin is not really a problem. We keep building Bitcoin like Noah's Ark, and we keep having that ready, and we keep educating. Whenever and that is just by logical necessity. If these stuff are unsustainable, because I'm right, they will collapse, and we will be ready to welcome them back. If I'm wrong and they are stable forever, and we are going to have the perfect dollar forever with zero. So if we're going to have USDT stable in purchasing power with zero censorship on Polygon for the next 300 years, let's freaking use Polygon. I don't care at this point. So it's logical necessity. So I'm very optimistic.
I love that. We don't have to be necessarily the fastest or even the most exciting right now. We just have to outlive them, and we're going to outlive them. So it's low time preference. Just calm down. You'll be fine. You just got to wait them out. They'll kill themselves. What a beautiful, beautiful note to end it on. Giacomo, tell everybody where they can go and check out your stuff. They can follow you, all the good links.
Twitter, I'm Giacomo Zucco, but don't follow me there because I'm very controversial and I will probably get you mad. So follow Plan B _ network. You can also find Plan B network on Nostr, and other socials. PlanB.network is the website. You will find all the initiatives that we do and a lot of sub-site, because we have the Plan B Academy, the Lugano Plan B. We have a lot of other stuff. So check it out, and especially come to San Salvador and stay tuned for the first Cypher Tank episode on the 31st of January. I'm very excited for that.
Hey, you. Yes, you watching the Bitcoin price movements and the latest exciting news. It's awesome to stay informed, but the real power of Bitcoin comes from taking control. Don't just watch, take action. Head over to btcsessions.ca/learn for free step-by-step tutorials that guide you through every major skill you need to know, plus full video playlists for deeper dives on any topic you like. And if you're ready for the ultimate fast track, scroll to the bottom and check out bitcoinmentor.io for premium one-on-one experience with my team of Bitcoin experts to ensure you get it right the first time. Don't wait. Secure your Bitcoin future today. Hit the link in the show notes or scan the QR code on the screen.
If you enjoyed this episode with Giacomo Zucco, please do like and subscribe. It really helps out. And check out the previous episode with musical artist IMA.